Friends of Refined Investments. Today, of course, we're continuing to talk about XRP, and not about some Twitter fantasy or something from the farthest corner of the internet, but about a thesis that's currently extremely exciting. I mean, XRP could currently have one of the best risk-reward setups in the entire crypto market. And I mean, sure, before someone says again, hey, Dave, you're totally XRP infected. I mean, sure, you could see it that way, but that's exactly why today we're not just blindly putting on these green tinted glasses. Instead, we'll go through everything properly and thoroughly. So what are the key arguments for XRP? Why might the Mastercard story be undervalued? Why is the comparison between XRP and Bitcoin so compelling now? Finally, we'll revisit the controversy. Can XRP reach $1,000 long term? Before we get started, make sure to check out my crypto campus. Everything kicks off on Monday, but you can already go to the site now. You can track prices, set up your portfolio, mark favorites, and there are many other features available on the site as well. But all day long, we're doing nothing else but working on it. That means there are plenty of other things coming in the future. As I said, Monday is the launch, so feel free to check it out. The link is, of course, in the video description. You can also sign up directly with Google. So yes, when it comes to security and so on, a lot of work has gone into it. Plus, every morning you'll also get a little analysis here. It gets updated every morning at 7 o'clock. And then you'll have a brief assessment of the market. But you'll also have all the indicators, whether it's the Fear and Greed Index, altcoin season value, etc. So I'd really appreciate it if you check it out. But now let's get started. Quickly give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. As you can already see in the background here, Mastercard is working on making my settlement processes more flexible, faster, and also more modern. And in this context, the XRP ledger also plays a role, or rather, Ripple together with RLUSD plays a very significant role. And now it's also important that we simply phrase this clearly. Because, I mean, it doesn't automatically mean that Mastercard will wake up tomorrow morning and say, okay, folks, from today on, we're all going to buy XRP and send everyone coffee over the blockchain. Of course, that's not how the world works. I mean, sure, that would be nice. I'd probably be recording this video from some villa with a waterfall, but what's really exciting here, I mean, the XRP ledger is increasingly appearing in various areas. In areas where, well, yes, it's mainly about institutional payment processing, stable coins, liquidity, settlements, and so on. And by settlement, I basically mean that a payment isn't just shown somewhere, but is actually processed in the end. And finally, it is also officially recorded. So, precisely the part where the traditional financial system is often slow, expensive, and simply unnecessarily complicated. And this is exactly where Ripple's strength lies, of course. Specifically with the XRP ledger, because I mean, we have fast settlements, low costs, 24/7 availability, and an infrastructure that's not just meant for small meme coin gambling, but really for genuine financial processes. That's also the point for me. The market is currently only looking at the price. If XRP drops, okay, then everything just seems bad right now. If XRP doesn't go up immediately, then suddenly everything is dead. But while many are just watching the candles, things are happening in the background. Right now, more building blocks for real use are being created. We shouldn't underestimate that. From my perspective, XRP's fundamentals aren't getting weaker, they're actually getting stronger. But the price is still behaving as if relatively little has happened. That's why it's hard for outsiders to assess the situation right now. We've seen this in the crypto market. The market isn't always rational. Sometimes good news is ignored. Sometimes some coins with no substance pump 300% overnight just because there's a dog with sunglasses on the logo. That happens too, but I mean, with XRP, it's actually the other way around. There are announcements, partnerships, institutional developments, regulatory progress, and the price basically says, I don't care right now, I'm just going to take a nap. But it's exactly these kinds of phases that are often exciting. Not pleasant, but they're extremely exciting. Because when the mood is bad, but the fundamentals are getting stronger in the background, something happens. Sometimes those are exactly the moments you later see on the chart and wonder, why? Why didn't I actually take a closer look back then? That's usually the problem, that people end up getting in way too late when everything already looks positive again, when the price has already made big gains. Then suddenly they panic and say, oh, the project isn't actually that bad. But in phases like now, you should really be preparing yourself properly and not wait until everything is skyrocketing again and then say, oh yeah, I think I'll get in now. That's just nonsense. Honestly, people, I don't know, a lot of them just approach it the wrong way. But now let's get to the Bloomberg thesis, or rather the research that's currently being circulated. I mean, XRP is supposed to have one of the best risk-reward profiles in the crypto market. Risk-reward simply means how much risk am I taking on and how much potential return do I get in exchange for that. So, of course, Bitcoin is the biggest player, Bitcoin is more established, Bitcoin has the ETFs, and for many institutions, Bitcoin is also the first entry point into crypto. But that's also why, with Bitcoin, part of the hype is already priced in. And that's why, of course, we won't see Bitcoin suddenly overnight, an 80% jump or something like that. That's very, very unlikely. XRP is definitely different in that regard. I mean, sure, XRP is more volatile, XRP is more emotional, XRP has a community that sometimes sounds like it's about to single-handedly overthrow the global banking system at any moment. But XRP also has a narrative that is stronger than with almost any other coin. And that's simply this connection between crypto and the traditional financial system. And that's exactly where it gets extremely interesting. If you believe in crypto not just as speculation, but as a new financial infrastructure, then you also have to ask yourself, okay, which projects are even meant for that, positioned for that? And that's where XRP ends up pretty quickly at the very top of the list. A lot of people always criticize XRP with the same arguments. Yeah, but there aren't that many smart contracts, or other chains have more developers, or Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche. There's just so much more happening there. So why don't you buy those? And yes, that's partly true. If we're only talking about DeFi, NFTs, meme coins, and decentralized apps or things like that, then XRP is obviously not the loudest playground. But XRP is simply playing a completely different game. XRP isn't trying to be the next casino chain where 500 new dog coins launch every week. XRP is much more focused on payments, liquidity, banks, stablecoins, cross-border payments, transfers, and so on. It's simply designed for that, and for me, that's the clear difference. With XRP, it is not so much about how many decentralized applications run on it, and more about whether you can eventually replace traditional infrastructure one day, or ensure that it simply plays a substantial role in today's or the future global financial system. I mean, if you can answer that question with yes, then you also understand why some investors find XRP so exciting despite all the criticism. Let's also look at a point that's extremely important, XRP versus Bitcoin. Because I mean, in the end, it's just not enough for XRP to go up a bit in dollars at some point, just a little bit. The really interesting question is also, can XRP outperform Bitcoin? In other words, can XRP perform better than Bitcoin? That's exactly where the XRP BTC chart becomes extremely interesting, because if XRP gets stronger against Bitcoin, it simply means that capital is relatively flowing out of Bitcoin and into XRP, or at least that XRP is falling less than Bitcoin. And especially during weaker market phases, that's an extremely important signal. Normally, when the market drops, altcoins often fall harder than Bitcoin. In those times, Bitcoin is kind of the safe haven within a relatively uncertain or volatile crypto market, like a nutshell in a storm, so to speak. But if XRP shows stability against Bitcoin during such a phase, or even hints at a small reversal, then you should definitely take that seriously. Of course, that doesn't automatically mean everything is going to the moon tomorrow, but it simply means that something might be changing in the balance of market forces. And that's what's so exciting about it. Another point is the RSI. So RSI simply stands for Relative Strength Index, and it's basically an indicator that, put simply, just shows whether an asset is more likely overbought or oversold. When the RSI is very high, there's often already a lot of euphoria in the market. When the RSI is very low, there's often fear, frustration, fatigue, or something similar prevailing. Basically just the opposite. Exactly these kinds of low points have also always been very interesting historically for XRP. Of course, it wasn't always perfect, because no indicator rings and says, Dave, please buy now, it is going up. That would be nice, and I'd probably have an indicator shop by now, but that's just not how it works. Phases like this simply show the market is exhausted, many have sold, are annoyed, and no longer believe in it. It's precisely during these times that, in the long run, better opportunities arise than when everyone is posting rocket emojis and some cousin is asking if he should quickly get into XRP now. So, what I just mentioned a little earlier, that's usually not the best timing. Simply put, but now, of course, we also have to talk about risk, Bitcoin, and MicroStrategy. I mean, MicroStrategy, or rather, MicroStrategy is extremely closely tied to Bitcoin through Michael Saylor. The company has built up huge Bitcoin holdings, and for many investors, that's just how it is. By now, it's almost become a kind of system for institutional Bitcoin trust, but that's exactly where risk arises as well. Because, I mean, if doubts arise about the financing structure, the products, or the stability of the entire construct, that can also put short-term pressure on Bitcoin. On the other hand, why is this relevant for XRP now? Because a weaker Bitcoin narrative can eventually also trigger rotation, not immediately and not guaranteed, but if investors realize, okay, Bitcoin is no longer the only exciting institutional crypto case, then of course they'll start looking at other assets as well. And XRP is one of the few coins that has its own institutional narrative, not just faster, cheaper, better, but truly its own payments, banks, stablecoins, tokenized assets, liquidity. So if Bitcoin happens to weaken in the short term, it doesn't mean that XRP will also remain weak in the long term. It could even mean that capital starts seeking alternatives. And in that case, XRP could be a solution. I mean, the market currently often values XRP like just another regular altcoin, as if to say, okay, what's hyped right now this week? Which chain has the most memes at the moment? Where are the loudest influencers? But in my opinion, you should actually see XRP more as an infrastructure bet. And infrastructure, of course, is generally a more boring topic until it suddenly becomes important. I mean, nobody looks at a highway and says, wow, it's gone up 20% today. But when suddenly half of all goods traffic runs over that road, you start to understand its value in a completely different way. It's pretty much the same with XRP. I mean, as long as there isn't any real usage or it's not massively visible yet, everything naturally seems extremely theoretical. But if stablecoins, banks, payment providers, and tokenized assets move onto such networks, market value can develop in a completely different way, and that can happen in a relatively short time. But now that the discussions have started up again about XRP hitting $1,000 and so on, so anyone who really thinks that XRP could jump to $1,000 overnight should probably just sit down, have a coffee, and get some fresh air, because that's simply not going to happen. In the short term, that's also so far removed from reality, regardless of the whole market cap story. I know you can look at it from different perspectives, but still we're talking about a very, very short period of time here. That's just not feasible. We're not just talking about a small pump here, but about a complete revaluation of the asset. But I mean, in the long term, the question is a completely different one. I mean, can an asset that seems cheap today grow exponentially over many years if it plays a real role in a huge market? And the answer to that is, of course, yes. Such things can fundamentally happen. Throughout history, we've seen time and again that assets, companies, or technologies are eventually valued completely differently when they become systemically relevant. What once sounded like fantasy later seems, in retrospect, almost logical once it has actually happened. Of course, that doesn't mean that XRP is definitely going to $1,000, so don't get me wrong. But it simply means that you shouldn't make the mistake of ruling out long-term exponential developments just because at today's prices they might seem crazy. If everyone thought that way, we'd have a huge problem. But of course, for XRP to actually reach those levels, an extremely large number of things would have to happen. I mean, first of all, XRP, or rather, the XRP ledger would have to play a much bigger role in global payments. Secondly, stablecoins like RLUSD would also have to be used much more extensively and gain real institutional significance. Thirdly, tokenized assets such as government bonds, funds, real estate shares, and others. Assets on the blockchain would have to be transacted much more through networks like the XRP ledger. Fourth, I mean, banks and payment service providers would not only have to test the infrastructure, but actually use it to a significant extent. They would also have to use it. Fifth, regulation would have to be reduced as well. I mean, institutions won't fully enter the market if legally everything looks like a tangled mess of cables behind the TV. I mean, if these things come together, then XRP simply won't be the same anymore, just a coin that is traded on Binance or on Coinbase. Then XRP would be part of a very large financial infrastructure. And that's exactly when the logic of valuation changes as well. Step by step, my conclusion today is pretty clear. In the short term, my XRP remains volatile. This thing can be frustrating, it can move sideways, it can even drop further if the overall market comes under more pressure. But in the long term, XRP remains for me one of the most exciting and asymmetrical bets in the entire crypto market. Asymmetrical in this case simply means that the risk is real, but the potential upside is, in comparison, truly exceptional, high. And that's exactly why with XRP, I simply don't just look at today's price. I look at the positioning, I look at Ripple, I look at the XRP ledger, I look at institutional payment infrastructure. I simply look at the question, where could real usage actually emerge in the coming years? And that's why XRP remains for me quite clearly one of the most exciting candidates in the entire crypto market. But feel free to share your opinion about this in the comments. Is XRP really one of the best risk-reward setups in the entire crypto market for you right now? Or do you say, yeah, somehow nothing's happening there, it's all boring, I don't care about any of it? Because I can already tell that people are getting more and more annoyed about XRP these days and are becoming less patient. So, yeah, I don't know. You need patience in phases like this. What's important for us is simply to make use of phases like this. People are currently being flushed out. Those who really stick with it now are the ones who will cash in again during the next bull run. It's been that way for over 15 years. From that perspective, it's very exciting. But of course, you can see my club do campus in the background. It all starts Monday. That's why I have to mention it here, of course. I'm happy to, as I've put a lot of time into it. I built all of this myself. And that's why, yeah, I just think it's awesome. And of course, I'm still working on it day by day. Currently, at least 15 hours a day are being spent working on it. Some people only ever see a website or something like that, but what goes on behind the scenes is something many just can't imagine. It's a lot of work, and simply many, many hundreds of hours to get it properly up and running. But you can see the countdown, 4 days, 11 hours, then it all begins. Of course, you can already sign up, secure early access, enter your email, and so on. Then you'll get information about it. And on Monday, it all starts. But yes, I'd say that's it for today's video. Keep your chin up, and yes, see you soon.